we're going to start fucking you up again. As Obama was negotiating the end of the Iraq War, which he gets a lot of credit for, he sent Robert Gates, the then Secretary of Defense, to Iraq to try to negotiate an extension of the Status of Forces Agreement. That's when Chelsea Manning released the Iraq war logs, which revealed to Iraqi society the extent to which the U.S. had been killing Iraqi civilians and getting away with it. And, you know, the immunity for U.S. soldiers who make crimes became a big contingent for the Iraqi government for whether or not the U.S. could extend the Status of Forces Agreement. But the Mahdi Army, when Gates was in Iraq, trying to get the U.S. to stay in Iraq longer, which is what Obama really wanted to do, the Mahdi Army held a march of 100,000 armed people with all their military vehicles, with all their rockets, with like all their equipment, marching over an American flag and saying, if you are here one day past the day that we're allowing you, we are going to start killing you again. And then the U.S. said, like, all right, we'll go back to this area where we're allowed and we're not going to risk that. Because they were basically like, it was a flex. They were like, we can start obliterating you at any time, and if you don't do what we say right now, we're going to do it. And the U.S. acquiesced, and the U.S. Pulled back to the area that they were told that they had to pull back to. The fact that they are now again saying it is back on, I mean, it doesn't matter how many U.S. Special Forces you have there, it will be devastating. It's something that would need the scale, in terms of a military standpoint, for the U.S. to achieve any kind of like military win there, they would have to send more soldiers than they sent to Iraq during the troop surge, because it's this army, it's all these other militias that are working with them, uniting with them, and Iran. It's like it's at such another scale than the height of the Iraq War, and the height of the Iraq War was pretty fucking bad.
Yeah, and now you have people talking about Israel's involvement and foreknowledge of this, Mike. I mean, the fact that Israel knew about the drone strike days before Trump initiated it,
and Congress didn't.
Before Congress knew, of course, that this was done completely unilaterally without congressional approval, of course. Senator Ted Cruz, and I wanted to say some stuff about Israel more, but Senator Ted Cruz praised Trump's killing as a long overdue justice for our Israeli allies, which becomes a little bit more clear when you look at what Israel's response is to this. And do not forget, of course, the context of this, the fact that Netanyahu has been the main driver behind the dismantlement of the Iran nuclear deal, the fact that he came to Congress in an unprecedented fashion years ago to appeal to Congress, begging them to vote against the Iran nuclear deal, saying this is a horrible deal for the U.S. That was insane. That was insane that he did that. You have Sheldon Adelson, the top funder of the Trump administration, of course, Congress, who has advocated for nuking Iran. So these are huge hardcore Zionists that have had a huge influence in this entire process, and of course have basically just been a big influence on Trump's advocacy toward Israel and, of course, aggression toward Iran. But here's how Netanyahu responded to this. He said, President Donald Trump is, quote, worthy of full appreciation for acting with determination, strongly and swiftly, he said. And here's the funny part, guys. You know the so-called left in Iran, this opposition party that we were told the left was going to win, Mike, and unfortunately Netanyahu is just...
In Israel.
Iran, I'm sorry, in Israel, we keep hearing this notion that there's a left and that there's a solid opposition, and Netanyahu's on his way out because he's corrupt. Well, even so-called opposition parties within Israel chimed in to agree. You had Amir Peretz, head of the quote-unquote center-left, right, Labor Party, said that this guy deserved to die. He thanked Trump. You have Benny Gantz, former head of the IMF, a war criminal who was also touted as a leftist, basically between Trump in the last election. He said the killing was an appropriate response to anyone responsible for murder of countless innocent people and for undermining global stability. So you just have this narrative being parroted over and over again. But it's just funny that when you look at Israel and you even have people like Ted Cruz, kind of the cat out of the bag, being like, this was justice for Israel. It is disgusting when you look at how Israel has nuclear weapons, Iran does not. And the fact that they were privy to this drone strike. And Mike, reports are coming out that Israel was already launching drone strikes against this militia for months via U.S. military bases with the knowledge and approval of the U.S. already for weeks and weeks, potentially months. So this has already been happening, building up to this.
Yeah, I believe it.
So let's the Pentagon whenever you are on the precipice of war, including Democratic Party officials, and we're going to go over all of their statements. But first, Mike, I want to get your response to some of this absurd media coming out. As Chomsky said, I mean, a dictator would admire the uniformity of the U.S. media, and that's exactly what we're seeing today. It's so shocking that you have, the neoliberal media. Of course, Fox is lockstep with Trump, but you have the neoliberal media machine, the blob, right? The neoliberal blob, and all these military-industrial complex people just going on talking about how Trump is this dangerous figure who's mentally ill. He's an aberration to normalcy. How could we ever possibly allow him to do anything? They continue to fund endless military budgets. The last one was near $1 trillion with the NDAA, expand his surveillance powers, and now on the eve of a war that could be so much more catastrophic than the Iraq War, what are they doing, Mike? They're going on the news and talking about how bad of a guy this guy was and how he needed to die and how Trump is actually good for bombing him. CNBC put out an article that the title of the headline, America just took out the world's #1 bad guy. Are we a nation of children? Are we a nation of children? And in it, I mean, it basically says, we're already hearing from a number of critics that this move will likely backfire against the U.S. and will provoke Iran to retaliate even more forcibly against Americans. Even more forcibly? When the fuck have they retaliated before? To those people making those warnings, there's really only one thing to say. Welcome to the party, pal. Really responsible journalism from CNBC there. And Mike, this is just across the board. MSNBC running stories all day about how this general was planning attacks on U.S. diplomats and soldiers with zero evidence. Zero evidence. WMD's 2.0.
Yeah, the evidence is the Pentagon said so. It's like, we want to kill this guy. Trust me, he's going to do something bad. And it's like, oh, that's the story. You know what I mean? It's like media is supposed to not just report what people in power say. They're supposed to analyze, is this true? Can this be verified? Does this line up with the facts? But they're not doing that. They're literally just reporting exactly what the Pentagon and Trump, for that matter, is saying. I mean, I think the top story I saw after this happened was like CNBC that said that the U.S. just killed the Middle East #1 bad guy. And that was the headline. It was like, oh, great. That sounds like a really good thing that happened.
It keeps changing.
Right.
First it was Maduro, and then it was Putin, and now it's this guy that no one's ever heard of before. But he was the #1 bad guy, guys. He was going to kill a bunch of Americans.
Oh, right, yeah. There's an endless line of... It's like the deck of cards when the Iraq was invaded in 2003. There was like a deck of cards. Saddam was like the ace of spades, but there's all these other guys. Every card was a different top bad guy. And so, like, success was measured in the first years of the Iraq War was, ooh, what guy in the deck of cards we got? And the war couldn't be over until you got everyone in the deck of cards. But then the more the war goes, the more people get added to the deck of cards because then more new leaders replace older leaders. And it's just like...
You mean the global war on terror hasn't stopped terrorism worldwide? That's shocking. But also, Mike, I thought we were getting them over there so they wouldn't get us over here. Right? Is that still a thing? And then speaking of the Bush administration and its absurd rhetoric, very babyish, childish rhetoric, Ari Fleischer, Bush administration official, was just on the news all day talking about how people are celebrating in Iran, Mike. They're all out in the streets with candy and flowers, thanking American troops, thanking the great Satan, America, for taking out a leader who was favorably rated at very high levels, 82%. Can you imagine even any? I don't think any U.S. politician has that high of favorability here. People view Congress like more reprehensible than cockroaches in this country. So that's disgusting. To repeat this absurd propaganda, you have Jake Tapper, never met a war he didn't like, on CNN. He's retweeting Oz Kajari, this notorious regime change troll, who said, if you genuinely think the best situation for world peace is keeping a man who butchered as many civilians as Soleimani did, then I suggest your definition of world peace needs some fine-tuning. Very responsible journalism, Jake. Thank you so much. Of course, you have Susan Rice on CNN saying he was a murderer, a terrorist of the worst order. How? How is he a terrorist of the worst order? What the hell did he do? How is he a murderer? It's just disgusting. Couldn't you say the same thing about the CIA? I mean,
well, that would be valid, right?
That would be absolutely valid. Christine Amanpour, CNN, talking about how he was at the height of his power when he was taken out, but it's not the person you take out, it's what they leave behind, right? Al-Qaeda didn't end with the death of bin Laden. ISIS didn't end with the death of al-Baghdadi. Critical to know what the strategy is for the next steps, Mike. As Dan Cohen said, to compare this guy to ISIS and al-Qaeda is just shockingly irresponsible and grotesque. You should be ashamed of yourself, Christine Amanpour. And then, of course, you have Fox News, Mr. Anti-Neocon Mr. Neocon, right? Worked at the Weekly Standard for years, right next to Bill Kristol, turned Mr. Anti-Neocon, Tucker Carlson, twisting himself in knots to blame the neocons, right? They're the ones who want this, Mike. It's not Trump. Trump really doesn't want a war with Iran. I don't know how you can possibly blame John Bolton since he left the administration quite some time ago, but that's what you have over at Fox. Trump does not really want to do this himself, Mike, so pay no heed to the continuous stream of tweets coming out of Trump's ass, basically saying they will pay dearly for everything that they've done. This is a threat, we're going to annihilate you, etc.
I mean, Trump campaigned on bombing Iran. I mean, he literally said that his famous line of like, we'll blow their ships out of the water. I mean, he campaigned on tearing up the Iranian nuclear agreement, which he immediately did. I mean, so the fact that there's someone pulling the strings and like making Trump do stuff he doesn't want to do, like this is the rhetoric he got into office on and immediately started following through on, putting more devastating sanctions on Iran, getting him out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, and other types of actions that were blatant acts of aggression as well, bringing us to this point, right? I mean, so the whole idea that, oh, he was like an anti-interventionist and whatever, it's like he campaigned on war and he expanded every single war that was going on that he inherited when he took office. And so this isn't out of the blue. I mean, I think there's been a lot of people even surprised, like, oh, I thought he was the anti-interventionist president. It's like, this is the last year of his administration. He's already been president for 3 fucking years, and all he's done is expand war, increase bombings, increase this. It's like he's been showing this whole time.
But Mike,
it's not out of character.
But Mike, he tweeted, I want to end endless wars. It doesn't matter what he's
Right.
actually doing on the ground to maneuver all these troops out of Syria back into the perpetual occupation of Iraq, the devastating genocidal sanctions all across